Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Right Stuff with TV Toastmasters. I'm Ken Coomes, your host, and tonight we have the pleasure of speaking with Marvin Mitchell. He's had a variety of backgrounds and careers and learned a lot, especially about something common to all of them, and that is words. So we're going to talk about words tonight. Welcome, Marvin.
Thank you, Ken.
So before we talk about words, I mentioned your varied background. Would you like to tell us a little bit about where you've come from, the things you've done leading to today?
That's a long trail, but I do remember the beginning. And I spent 35 years in IT, information technology. I started long before it was IT. I've gone through all the iterations of data processing and up through IT. And then I spent 15 years in the nonprofit world. And in both of those careers, I was encouraged and sometimes had to use lots of big words and jargon and that sort of thing. So I developed a habit of using more words than I needed to. And once I stopped that, I have been on a quest for short words.
So I need to ask, first of all, when you were using all these big, long words and jargon, sometimes required to use them, what gave you a clue that maybe you could do this with shorter words?
Well, I couldn't understand. I couldn't remember them.
Oh, okay.
And it caused me trouble. I could write all right because when you're writing, you can rewrite. I'm trying to find the same mechanism for when I speak. When I joined Toastmasters, that's about 15 years ago. That's when this all started. Because when you speak, if you use big words, they're hard to remember. And you can't edit on the way out. You get one chance at it. And I found I could write briefly and make sense, but I had trouble speaking briefly. In fact, what really caused a change was 6 years ago now. I spoke to the audience at the conference of the District Toastmasters Club, and my topic was the ABCs of communication in 2014. It was a 16-minute speech, and I went over by about 30 seconds. But the feedback forms from the audience really caused me to stop and think, because one person wrote, "You spent way too much time talking about brevity." And it really triggered something in me because, yeah, I did. That speech I was able to memorize from beginning to end, which is good. And it does help to put in pauses because I needed a lot of them to try to remember what I was saying or about to say. But it really struck home. You can spend a lot of time explaining something simple, and if you use simple words, it's clear. You don't have to worry about it. And so I've come to the point where I still have the same topic. It's much shorter now. I can do it in 4 or 5 minutes. But instead of before it was the ABCs of communication, authenticity, brevity, and clarity. Now it's be alive, be brief, be clear. So even the title got shorter.
Okay. I have to ask, well, first of all, Stephen King, in his book on writing, he talks about words as well, and short words. He says that when you think of a word, usually the first word you think of is the right word to use. Sometimes authors, rewriting, editing, get caught up in this, what's a better way to say that, and maybe a better sounding highfalutin word, something longer with more syllables. But aside from that, I need to ask, 16 minutes down to 4 to 6, you said now?
Yes.
Was that all due to shortening the words, or was the content shorter now as well?
The content's a little shorter, but it was primarily really honing the words, sharpening them. Just like with a saw that's dull, it takes a lot longer to cut through a piece of wood than if your saw is sharp. And I should know that. I'm grandson of a carpenter, and I learned how to build things
Okay.
that way. And one of the rules was you keep your instruments sharp. Same thing with a knife.
Good point. Good point. So I assume the section on brevity now is shorter.
It is shorter.
But all the others are as well.
Yes.
What is the easiest way that you have found when you do think a long word is the appropriate word instead of the right word, for example? How do you figure out what's the best short word? How short can it be?
As short as possible. And it doesn't come to me always at first. It takes a little work. And that's why I like writing better than speaking, because I can hone it. I can make it shine if I have enough time to do it. So I'm trying to find a filter, the mechanism, so that I can speak in simple words and use words that have punch, that mean what I really want to say. And that frequently means I don't use a lot of adjectives, or I try not to, or some adverbs too. Trim the stuff. And one of the things I'm trying to do is not use words like stuff. Or my other favorite go-to word, I don't do ums and ahs much anymore, but I use the word things a lot. That is another, you got to have a goal somewhere. And my goal is to be things free.
So one of the things you want to do besides being short is avoid stuff and things, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
There's no question. Yeah.
Fair enough. Speaking of writing and editing, and if you have enough time, being able to trim that down, I'm guessing that you probably write your speeches in advance so that you get the chance to edit them and prepare them a little bit shorter.
I do, but then if I try to memorize them, that doesn't work, so it's all out the window anyway. One of the things I've discovered, because I do write and speak, and I do graphic design too, as well as other kinds of design, is that there's a common vocabulary, and vocabulary is a long word which I'm trying to substitute a good short word for, use of words. I call it my bag of words.
Okay.
Because that makes sense to me, it's easy to understand. But there's a commonality between writing and designing and drawing and page layout and speaking. So I'm trying to introduce the same concept for me. For instance, white space on a printed page and on a digital page is important. That is the same thing as the right kind of pauses when you're speaking. And it's the same thing when you're writing something. You leave spaces, you have shorter sentences. It makes it, in this rapidly diminishing age of attention spans, it makes more sense that if you can write short, have shorter sentences, but not all sentences short, but be able to have white space around your words in thought as well as in...
Perhaps it would be fair to say that on the printed or digital page, the white space allows the words that are there, regardless of their length, maybe to breathe a little.
Yes.
And when you pause, when you're speaking, it allows your audience to absorb a little and breathe a little. So those words get to breathe through space. But I have to ask, because you're talking about short words and short sentences and brevity, have you been influenced at all by things like the short word count for tweets?
Yes. How's that for a short answer?
That's a good short answer. That's brief and to the point. But I'd like to know more.
Okay, I don't tweet
Okay.
for several reasons, none of them to do with the use of language. But some of the same kinds of words and structures come through in writing for posts or in speaking or even writing for information. There's one thing, I have this, I wrote it down because I can't memorize some of this, but talking about words and syllables, There are readability tests that let you know how dense or how easy to understand something is. And the Wikipedia definition of that is modern readability tests are designed to indicate comprehension difficulty when reading a passage of contemporary academic English. That's 17 words. It's got 41 syllables in it. And when you hear it, you need to hear it twice. If you're reading it, you can go back and reread it. But if you just hear it, it's pretty dense. So I looked up some other 17-word things. There's things again. But one of the most famous is, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. John F. Kennedy's quotation from his State of the Union message. That's 17 words, it's only 19 syllables. It's easy to understand and it has impact and you can remember the thought. We compare that with the one about the definition for readability. That's 17 words, but it has 41 syllables. There's another quote I like by Les Brown, the inspirational speaker. He said, never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. That's 17 words, and it's only 24 syllables. And the words are shorter.
So, at about half the syllables of the Wikipedia quote you read about readability, we're getting more punch, more impact, something easier to hear the first time and understand. And I was challenged in one presentation, why don't you rewrite the 41 syllable definition? So I tried it. My first cut, and I'm probably not through with it yet, is 17 words. Modern readability tests show how hard or easy it is to understand anything written in English. I think that sounds better, but we're going to take a short break here, and we'll pick that up when we come back.
All right.
So we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone, my name is Christopher Taylor and I'm with TV Toastmasters. My home group is Feedbackers in Beaverton, Oregon. I first joined Toastmasters for a couple reasons. I was nervous. I had trouble speaking in front of others. I needed some help. And when I joined Toastmasters, not knowing what to expect, I learned several things. One, it gave me the confidence to speak in front of others. I learned how to take constructive criticism. I benefited from that. That benefit was the confidence to get a job. When I took the suggestions in the club, when I started speaking in front of a group and remained speaking through my role, doing table topics, getting topics that you're unaware, learning how to think on your feet, learning how to speak on your feet. I first started working managing the Berkshire Hathaway account. I started as a back office role, not the face of the company. It didn't take long until I was dealing directly with the executives. Today I give executive briefings for Verizon Enterprise in the highest level in the enterprise space. And I'm grateful and I owe all of that to Toastmasters. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Right Stuff. I'm your host, Ken Coomes, and we're talking with Marvin Mitchell tonight about words, particularly shorter words. So welcome back, Marvin.
Thank you.
So we were talking about these number of syllables in some famous quotes or definitions about readability, for example, shorter words, the impact they have. And a lot of this is what you have been thinking about and researching and giving some effort into. But others have written about the brevity of writing, at least, have they not?
Yes. In fact, I have 7 books about writing, short, that I refer to all the time. And it's interesting when I look back on them because the oldest one is the shortest one.
Okay.
And The Elements of Style, Strunk in White, has 78 pages. The latest one I bought that was published this year in 2019 has 326 pages. And these books are about how to write short. That's a puzzle to me. There's a bigger word than puzzle, I know, but I like the word puzzle because I don't understand what's going on.
It sounds like, just like your speech on brevity, that part was too long. It sounds like these books on brevity are pushing the limit on how long they need to be.
I think they are.
So have you studied their use of words to see if they're longer because they have longer words or because they have more to say or some combination thereof?
I'm not sure they all have more to say. They all say more, which is quite different.
It is indeed.
And repetition, if you make the point well the first time, you don't have to repeat it. So, unless it's a long, complicated, dense passage, then you've got to use repetition to drive the point home. But if you say it crisply and use words that pack a punch, it may stick the first time.
You made an interesting comment earlier in our discussion, not on TV tonight, but comparing Faulkner to Steinbeck. I believe were the two authors you cited.
Hemingway.
Hemingway, okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah. And they're different styles. I'm not saying bad words shouldn't be used. It's just I choose not to use them. I want to try shorter words and less filler, not structure. In fact, I've got words now I classify as uppercase words, lowercase words, and just-in-case words. And the uppercase words are words like, well, if you capitalize a whole word on the screen, you're shouting.
Right.
When I'm writing something, if I just capitalize the first word, that gives it more importance.
Okay.
Not every word can be an uppercase word. That gets pretty boring, and that'll really drive people crazy or nuts. Simple word. But the lowercase words are words that are in there for structure, just to hold a sentence together, the articles and this sort of thing. You can do away with some of those lowercase words because they may not really help. Another lesson I got early it was about 5 or 6 years ago, the same time I got the note about my brevity being too long. I wrote a booklet that was 16 pages, and it was about homelessness and a lot of points. And I always tended to try to get as much information as possible. I wrote the whole thing out. I gave it to somebody to read. She took it home and showed it to her daughter. Her daughter said, "Oh, read this stuff. It's way too dense." So I sat down and one day, went through the whole booklet and lopped a third of the words off. And I was surprised. It was much better. So I've taken a lot of advice since then. If you use fewer words, it's more readable and it can make more sense. And so now I cut a third of my words out of my finished product. Then I polish them and find the best words I can. Then I go back and cut 1/3 more. And it's always better.
That's even more aggressive than Stephen King, who recommends your first reader reads your manuscript, the first draft, and you cut a minimum of 10% out. You're talking about a third, and more than once where you cut out more than a third.
Yes.
And yet, if we're reading for information, the reader probably prefers less density and easy retention. But what about pleasure reading? Suppose I'm in Mexico on the beach taking a vacation in the sun and I want a nice, long, relaxing read.
You should buy a Spanish book. Oh, but mood setting and lighter reading is okay because you're not trying to bear down and get something out of it that you can use right now. You're reading for pleasure. So just as I say, short sentences are my goal, but not all sentences can be short. You have to throw in some long ones from time to time, but you can do that even with single syllable words.
So syllable count instead of just word length.
Syllable count instead of word count. Because if you have the same number of words and 2 or 3 times as many syllables, it will sound like you're speaking faster. It's harder to read through when there's multi-syllable words in a string. So it changes the reading experience. If you're laying in the sun with a cold drink and you've got all week to read through a novel, then that's okay.
You mentioned the syllable count earlier when you were talking about that readability study from Wikipedia. And you gave us the well-known quote from John F. Kennedy. And you gave us another quote as well from someone else.
Yeah, Les Brown.
From Les Brown. And they used half the words roughly to make a more salient point, perhaps one that stuck to the person.
Yeah,
better.
they all use the same number of words, but the syllable count was about half.
Good point.
And so that's where I always got in trouble speaking, because I was speaking a number of words and I counted my words and I always ran over. And then I found out that, hey, if I look at the syllables rather than the words, that's a more accurate indication of how much time it's going to take me. And it also adds to clarity.
Well, I wonder if there's another facet here as well that lends itself to brevity. In today's fast-paced world, a lot of people, we like to say millennials, but I don't think it's just millennials, a lot of people today aren't as willing to sit down and spend that several hours reading a novel as they might have been 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yes.
So brevity might reach more people as well.
Yes, I think it can. And it's important. There's an example of that on the tunnel on Highway 26 on the way to the beach. They were struggling to find out how to remind people to turn off their lights when they went through the tunnel.
Okay.
So they struggled for a long time to find the signage, the words that would help people to do that. And finally they came up with the idea that just say lights ? Because you don't want to tell people to turn off their lights if it's nighttime. But just the word lights, that's all it took to just cause you to think, are the lights on, are the lights off? What do? I got to do something. And so that's a good example of brevity, how it can work in everyday life.
I've seen another example of that in a tunnel. I don't think it was here in Oregon, where the sign said, lights on for safety.
Mm-hmm.
Those 4 words reduced to 1 and a question mark is an excellent example, a good example of what you're talking about. Syllable count and brevity. It is.
That's right. And at the beginning of the tunnel, it says turn lights on. Well, that's redundant. If it's nighttime, you already got them on, I hope. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's an example of what you can do with trying to shorten it and take the same time and less paint.
I think you should talk to the Department of Transportation. Some of these signs that tell us how our tax dollars are at work have so many words and syllables that you cannot possibly safely read them while driving by.
Very true. There's enough people out there sometimes to everybody hold a letter by it. So
that could be an interesting way to get the information across. Well, Marvin, it's been a pleasure. I thank you very much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you, Ken.
For talking about brevity in such a brief way.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Right Stuff with Ken Coomes, your host. And tonight we've been speaking with Marvin Mitchell about short words and brevity. If you want to know more about that, you can reach Marvin at marvmitchell.com as shown on your screen. Thank you.
Welcome to an opportunity to take the next step of your professional speaking journey. I want you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever wished you were a star in a television show or at an event where the media is interviewing bystanders and you are wanting to be picked to give your opinion of the event? Or even in the smallest sense, you're at a sports game and secretly hope that your smiling face would appear on that big jumbo screen TV? But the jumbo screen always finds the fans with the painted faces. And you think to yourself, maybe next time. Well, what if I can offer you a chance to be on TV? Would you take it? That is what I want to offer you now. I'm Dottie Love, Associate TV Producer and Director. Toastmasters International is one of the largest organizations whose mission is to help improve your speaking skills. And District 7 is expanding your opportunities to do speaking via television. We have 4 fully equipped television studios and TV Toastmaster broadcasts to over 500,000 homes, plus a YouTube channel. Who knew? We want to invite you to take advantage of using media and television, either in front or behind the scenes. Let me share a few options that you have. First, you can be a guest on a show. Highlight your business or hobby or your community interest. Anything you're passionate about. Be a featured guest. Secondly, you can train to be a host on an ongoing TV segment. We will train you for that. Third, what about creating your own talk show? We will train you for that as well and give you access to a community media studio to do just that. Or lastly, be behind the scenes, either running a camera or editing shows. You decide which avenue is best for you, and our TV Toastmasters team will help you to navigate to get the most out of your media experience. Personally, I've done them all. I started as a guest, went to hosting, up to directing my own TV show. I don't tell you this to impress you. I tell you this to impress upon you that your personal growth with Toastmasters is directly related to what you take advantage of. And I encourage you to be bold in looking for opportunities to stretch and grow. If this intrigues you, or if you have club members who you think that might be interested in this, please contact us here at TV Toastmasters. I'm Dottie Love, and you can reach me or any of us in the TV Toastmasters family at the contact information at the bottom of the screen. You can also find us on the web. Our website is 7512.toastmastersclub.org.